The wind screamed like a dying animal through the peaks of Cedar Ridge, carrying with it the kind of cold that could stop a man's heart mid-beat. It was December 1883, and the blizzard that had been building for 3 days was finally showing its teeth. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees below zero, and the snow fell so thick that a man could barely see his own hand stretched out before him. Up on the ridge where the ponderosa pines grew twisted and gnarled from fighting the wind, year after year there stood a cabin. It was small, built from logs the color of old blood, with a stone chimney that sent a thin ribbon of smoke up into the white chaos of the storm. The cabin had been there for a decade, and in all that time only one man had called it home. Jacob Stone sat by his cast-iron stove, the firelight dancing across his weathered face. He was 49 years old, but the mountains had aged him in ways that numbers could not measure. His beard was thick and wild, streaked with gray that caught the light like silver wire. His hair, equally unkempt, fell past his shoulders in dark waves that had not seen scissors in years. The scar that ran from his right cheekbone down to his collarbone was a pale line against his sun-darkened skin, a reminder of a knife fight in Tucson that he had barely survived. His body was all muscle and sinew, built from a decade of splitting wood, hauling water, and tracking game through snow that came up to his waist. His hands were scarred and calloused, the hands of a man who had forgotten what softness felt like. He wore a wool shirt that had been patched so many times the original fabric was hard to distinguish, and buckskin pants that were stained dark with animal blood and dirt. Jacob was cleaning his Winchester 1873 working oil into the mechanism with the kind of focused attention that comes from years of depending on a tool for survival. The rifle was his constant companion, more reliable than any human being had ever been. He had named it Martha, though he never spoke the name aloud. That would have been too much like admitting that he still cared about anything. The cabin around him was sparse but meticulously organized. Beaver pelts hung on one wall, stretched and drying. His few possessions were arranged with military precision: a spare rifle, a Colt .45 revolver, boxes of ammunition traps for small game, a hunting knife with a bone handle. There was a single cot in the corner covered with furs. No curtains softened the windows. No photographs hung on the walls. Nothing that spoke of a life before this one. He had come to Cedar Ridge in the winter of 1873 after the fire, after Martha and Samuel, after the world had shown him that it had no mercy for good men who made the mistake of loving something. He had climbed up into these mountains, looking for a place to die slowly away from people and their lies and their casual cruelties. But somehow, year after year, he kept waking up, kept splitting wood, kept breathing. The storm outside intensified. Jacob stood and walked to the window, looking out at the wall of white. He had seen blizzards before, had survived them when lesser men would have frozen solid. This one was bad, perhaps the worst in 5 years. Nothing would be moving out there tonight except death itself. That was when he heard it. At first he thought it was just the wind playing tricks on ears that had grown too used to silence. But then it came again, a heavy thud against the door, followed by a sound that was unmistakably human, a moan of pain and exhaustion. Jacob's hand moved to the Winchester without conscious thought. He had not had visitors in 3 years, and the last one had been a lost prospector who Jacob had fed and sent on his way without more than a dozen words exchanged. No one came to Cedar Ridge by accident. The trail was too hard to find, too dangerous to travel without good reason. He moved to the door with the careful steps of a predator rifle raised. Whatever was out there, it had brought trouble with it. Trouble always followed people. That was why he lived alone. Jacob threw the bolt and kicked the door open. The wind exploded into the cabin, bringing with it a swirl of snow that hissed and spat against the hot stove. And there, collapsed against his doorframe, were 2 women. One was older, maybe in her early 40s, with black hair streaked with gray. She wore the dark dress of a Mexican widow, but the fabric was torn and stiff with frozen blood. Her face was pale as death, her eyes rolling back in her head. She was sliding down into the snowdrift, her strength completely gone. The other woman was younger, perhaps 27, and even through the layers of grime and frost, Jacob could see that she was Apache. Her hair was long and black, braided in the traditional way. She wore a dress made of deerskin decorated with beadwork that marked her as someone of importance among her people. Her face was angular and fierce, with high cheekbones and dark eyes that burned with a desperate determination. She was on her knees, one hand gripping Jacob's boot, the other supporting the older woman. "Please," the younger woman gasped. Her lips were blue with cold, her breath coming in short, painful bursts. "We will die out here, please." Jacob looked down at her. For a moment something stirred in his chest, something he thought he had successfully buried since the fire. The woman's eyes reminded him of Martha, not in color or shape, but in the fire that burned behind them. Martha had looked at him like that once when she had asked him to stay with her instead of re-enlisting. He had stayed, and it had cost her everything. "Get off my porch," Jacob said, his voice rough from disuse. "You bring trouble. I can smell it on you." "We bring only our lives," the Apache woman said. Her English was good, though heavily accented, "and those lives are nearly gone. If you are a man, you will help. If you are a coward, you will watch us freeze." The corner of Jacob's mouth twitched, almost imperceptibly. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to him with anything other than fear or deference. This woman, even on the edge of death, had the courage to challenge him. That took spine. He sighed a sound like wind through a canyon and stepped aside. "Drag her in. Don't touch anything but the floor, and don't bleed on my bearskin rug. It took me 3 days to cure that hide." The younger woman did not waste time thanking him. She hauled the older woman over the threshold with a strength that surprised Jacob. He slammed the door shut, cutting off the howl of the storm, and the sudden silence in the cabin was almost painful. The Apache woman collapsed beside her companion, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and cold. Jacob stood over them, rifle still in hand, studying them with the careful attention of a man who had learned to spot danger before it spotted him. The older woman was in bad shape. Her shoulder was soaked with blood, and when Jacob knelt down to tear away the fabric of her dress, he saw the unmistakable entry wound of a bullet. It had gone clean through, missing the bone, but the bleeding had been significant. She would be dead in an hour without help. Jacob grabbed a clay jug from his shelf and pulled the cork with his teeth. The smell of whiskey filled the cabin. He poured a generous amount into a tin cup and shoved it toward the Apache woman. "Get this into her. If she coughs it up, she lives. If she doesn't, you're dragging a corpse out come morning." The younger woman glared at him, a flash of anger cutting through her exhaustion. "You have a cruel way about you, sir." "I'm alive," Jacob said, turning his back to stoke the fire. "That's the only way that matters up here." He heard her coaxing the whiskey into the older woman's throat, heard the sputtering cough as the liquor burned its way down. Good. That meant her body was still fighting. Jacob added wood to the fire, building up the heat, then turned back to assess his uninvited guests. The younger woman was watching him with those fierce dark eyes, measuring him. She had released her grip on the older woman and was sitting back on her heels, her breath still coming hard but more controlled now. She had removed her heavy outer coat, revealing the deerskin dress beneath. It was well made, the beadwork intricate. This was not a common woman. This was someone who had been raised with care, with status. "What's your name?" Jacob asked, surprising himself. He had not asked anyone their name in 5 years. "Nalin," she said. "It means maiden in my language. This is Rosa Delgado. She is not my blood aunt, but she is family." Jacob nodded. "And who shot her?" Nalin's face hardened. "Bad men. Men who killed my father 6 months ago. Men who burned Rosa's husband alive in his office. Men who will not stop hunting us until we are dead, or they are." Jacob felt the familiar cold weight settle in his stomach. He had known it. Trouble. Always trouble with people. "They coming up the mountain, not in this storm," Nalin said. But when it breaks, yes, they will come. Then you rest tonight, Jacob said, and tomorrow you leave. We cannot leave, Nayland said. Rosa needs time to heal, and we have nowhere else to go. Jacob turned away, walking to the window to look out at the storm. Not my problem. This cabin is for one man. That's all it's ever been. That's all it's ever going to be. You live alone? Nayland asked. There was something in her voice, a gentleness that Jacob did not want to hear. A decade alone, that must be crushing. Loneliness is safer than people. Jacob turned back to face her. People die. People betray. People bring pain. Up here, the only thing that can hurt me is the cold, and I know how to fight the cold. Nayland held his gaze. Who did you lose? Jacob's jaw tightened. Sleep on the floor by the fire. There are furs in the chest. Don't steal anything. Don't touch my rifle. And in the morning, we talk about you leaving. He turned his back on her, a clear dismissal, and returned to his cot in the corner. He lay down with his face to the wall, the Winchester within arm's reach, and listened to the sounds of the two women settling in for the night. He heard Nayland pulling furs from the chest, heard her gentle murmuring to Rosa in Spanish, heard the older woman's labored breathing slowly ease into something closer to normal sleep. Jacob closed his eyes and tried to will himself into unconsciousness, but sleep did not come easily. The presence of others in his space felt wrong, invasive. The cabin suddenly seemed too small, the air too warm. He could smell them, the scent of fear and blood and woman, and it stirred memories he had worked hard to bury. Martha had smelled like sage and wood smoke. She used to braid her hair with dried flowers from the meadow near their farm. Samuel had always smelled like fresh dirt and grass stains, the smell of a boy who could not stay still, who wanted to explore every corner of the world. The fire had taken those smells away. The fire had taken everything. Jacob's hand moved unconsciously to his chest, to the place where his heart beat slow and steady. Sometimes he wondered if it had actually stopped that night, if everything since had just been a ghost's dream of life. But no. Pain was real. Cold was real. Loneliness was real. So he must still be alive even if he did not particularly want to be. The night passed slowly. The storm raged on, battering the cabin with wind that made the walls creak and groan. Jacob did not sleep, just lay in the darkness, listening to the breathing of the two women and the howl of the wind and the crackle of the fire. He was aware of every sound, every movement, his body tense and ready for trouble, even though logic told him no one could approach the cabin in this weather. As dawn broke gray and weak through the small window, Jacob rose. His body ached from the tension of the sleepless night, but he moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who did not waste energy on complaints. He fed the fire, put a pot of snow on to melt for water, and then stood looking down at his guests. Rosa was still sleeping, her breathing easier now. The color had returned to her face, though she still looked worn and fragile. Nayland was awake, sitting with her back against the wall, her arms wrapped around her knees. She watched him with those dark, fierce eyes. "Good morning," she said quietly. Jacob grunted. "Morning. Your aunt lived through the night. That's something. Thanks to you. Thanks to whiskey and a warm fire. Don't make it into more than it is." He walked to his stores and pulled out a strip of dried venison, tearing it in half. He tossed one piece to Nayland. "Eat. You need strength." She caught it one-handed and bit into the tough meat without complaint. Jacob watched her chew, noting the way she ate with purpose, without delicacy. This was a woman who had known hunger before, who did not take food for granted. "Tell me about the men hunting you," Jacob said, settling into his chair by the fire. "And don't lie. I can smell a lie like I can smell a wounded deer." Nayland swallowed and met his eyes. 6 months ago, my father, Chieftain Mongus, was killed. The American government said it was outlaws that he was caught in a robbery. But that was a lie. My father was murdered because he refused to sell our land. Your father was Mongus. Jacob felt something shift in his memory. He had heard that name even up here in his isolation. Mangas had been one of the last great Apache leaders, a man who had tried to find peace with the whites while still protecting his people. I heard about that. They said he was shot in a saloon fight. Another lie. Nayland said, her voice hard as flint. He was shot by a man named Cade Brennan, a hired killer. And the man who hired him was Cornelius Ashford. Jacob went very still. That name he knew. Cornelius Ashford was one of the richest men in the Arizona Territory, a railroad magnate who owned half the copper mines in the region. Jacob had never met the man, but he had heard stories. Ashford was ruthless, charming in public, and merciless in private. "Why would Ashford want your father dead, Copper?" Nayland said simply. "There is copper under our land. Ashford wanted to buy it for almost nothing. My father refused, so Ashford had him killed and bribed the authorities to call it something else. But Rosa's husband found proof." Rosa stirred at the mention of her husband, her eyes fluttering open. She looked around the cabin, confused for a moment, then focused on Nayland. "We are safe, for now, Tia," Nalin said gently. "This man gave us shelter." Rosa turned her gaze to Jacob. "Thank you, Senor. You saved our lives." Jacob shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Don't thank me yet. You're not out of the woods. Literally." "My husband, Miguel," Rosa said, her voice weak but steady. "He was Ashford's accountant. He found the payments to Brennan. He found the false contracts. He was going to take it to the territorial governor. And then," her voice broke, "then his office caught fire, with him inside." "The letter," Nayland said. "Rosa has the proof. A letter from Ashford to Brennan ordering my father's death. It is the only copy. That is why they hunt us. Without it, Ashford is untouchable." Jacob stood and walked to the window. The snow had stopped falling, at least temporarily. The sky was the color of old iron, heavy with the promise of more storms to come. He could see down the mountain from here, could see the switchback trail that led up to his cabin. It was barely visible under the fresh snow, but a man with determination could follow it, especially a man with a reason. "How many?" he asked. "4 men, Nayland said. Brennan and 3 others. They caught up with us 2 days ago. Rosa was shot. Our horses ran off in the storm. We walked through the night until we saw your smoke." Jacob did the math in his head. If they had walked through the night, the hunters were probably no more than half a day behind, maybe less. Once the storm cleared enough to see they would be coming, and 4 armed men against 1 hermit and 2 wounded women were not good odds. "You should have kept walking," Jacob said. "Led them past me." "We would have died in the snow," Nayland said, "and you would have been safe in your loneliness. But we are here now, and I think maybe you are not as content with loneliness as you pretend." Jacob turned to look at her. She was standing now, and despite her exhaustion, despite the dirt and the cold and the fear, there was something regal about her. She stood like a chief's daughter, like a woman who knew her own worth. "Don't presume to know me, girl," Jacob said. "I've been alone longer than you've been alive." "No," Nayland said softly. "You have been hiding. That is not the same thing." Before Jacob could respond, Rosa coughed. It was a wet, painful sound. Nayland immediately moved to her side, helping her sit up. Jacob watched them together, saw the care in Nayland's hands, the gentle way she supported the older woman. It reminded him too much of things he did not want to remember. "She needs medicine," Nayland said, looking up at Jacob. "Do you have anything herbs powder?" "I got whiskey and willow bark," Jacob said. "That's frontier medicine for you." "Then it will have to do." Nayland looked around the cabin. "Do you have clean cloth for bandages?" Jacob pulled open a trunk and tossed her a shirt, one of his old ones. "Tear that up. It's cleaner than anything else I got." Nayland caught the shirt and immediately began ripping it into strips. Jacob watched her work, noted the efficiency of her movements, the way her fingers moved with practiced skill. "You done this before," he observed. "My mother was a healer," Nayland said, not looking up from her work. "She taught me before she died. I have delivered babies, set broken bones, treated fevers. Among my people, I was respected for this skill." "Your people," Jacob said. "They at San Carlos Reservation. Nolan's face hardened. What is left of them, yes. After the soldiers came, after the treaties were broken, after men like Ashford stole everything we had. Jacob said nothing. He knew the story. Everyone in the territory knew it. The Apache had been rounded up, forced onto reservations, their way of life destroyed. It was the price of progress, the government men said. It was genocide, others said. Jacob had no opinion. He had stopped having opinions about things he could not change. Nolan finished tearing the shirt and began the delicate work of rebandaging Rosa's shoulder. Her hands were steady, gentle. Rosa winced, but did not cry out. "You are good at this," Rosa said to Nolan. "Your mother would be proud." "My mother would tell me I was a fool for getting you shot," Nolan said, but there was affection in her voice. "I got myself shot, mija. You tried to stop me from confronting Brennan. I did not listen. You never listen. And yet you love me anyway." Jacob turned away from them, unable to watch the tenderness between them. It hurt something in him that he thought was too scarred to feel pain anymore. He busied himself with putting coffee grounds into a pot, adding melted snow water, setting it on the stove to boil. "You like coffee?" he asked, his voice gruff. "Yes," Nolan said. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the coffee boil. The cabin felt smaller, with 3 people in it, the air thick with unspoken histories and shared danger. Jacob poured 3 cups and handed them out. Nolan wrapped her hands around the tin cup, savoring the warmth. "This is good," she said. "It's terrible," Jacob corrected, "but it's hot and it's got kick. That's all coffee needs to be out here." Nolan smiled just a little. It transformed her face, softened the hard edges that survival had carved into her features. "You are funny, in a sad way." "I'm not trying to be funny." "I know. That is what makes it funny." Rosa chuckled, which turned into a cough. But it was a real laugh, and Jacob found himself almost responding to it. Almost. He caught himself and frowned instead. "You should rest," he told Rosa. "Both of you. I need to check my traps, see what the storm did to my supplies. You stay inside. Don't go near the windows. Don't touch my rifle." "Where will you go?" Nolan asked. "Just around the cabin, 20 yards out. I'll be close enough to hear if you scream." "You think we would scream?" Jacob met her eyes. "I think if those men show up while I'm gone, you'd be smart to scream. I don't want to come back to corpses in my cabin. Blood's hard to clean out of wood." He pulled on his heavy coat, a thing made of bear hide that weighed 20 pounds when dry and 40 when wet. He checked the Colt at his hip, loaded and ready, then grabbed his rifle. At the door he paused and looked back. Nolan was watching him, her dark eyes unreadable. Rosa had already closed her eyes, exhausted by the simple act of drinking coffee. "Lock this behind me," Jacob said. "Don't open it for anyone but me. If someone else tries to get in, shoot through the door. Aim low. Most men don't expect that." "You sound like you know this from experience," Nolan said. "I know a lot of things from experience, most of them bad." He stepped out into the cold. The wind had died down to a low moan, and the world was white and still. His breath fogged in front of him as he walked the perimeter of his cabin, checking for tracks, for any sign that someone had approached during the night. He found nothing but rabbit prints and the ghostly impressions of a cougar that had passed by some time before dawn. His traps were mostly buried under snow. He would have to reset them later. The woodpile was good, though he would need to cut more before the next big storm. The creek was frozen solid. Everything was as it should be, as it had been for 10 years. Except now there were 2 women in his cabin, bringing with them the stink of the outside world and all its violence. Jacob stood at the edge of the ridge and looked down the mountain. Somewhere down there 4 men were waiting for the storm to break so they could ride up and kill the women he had foolishly given shelter to. He should turn them out now, let them take their chances. It was not his fight. He had no stake in their war. But even as he thought it, he knew he would not do it. Something in him, some stubborn remnant of the man he had been before the fire, would not let him send them to their deaths. Martha would have been ashamed of him if he did. Samuel would have been ashamed, and maybe, just maybe, Jacob was tired of being ashamed of himself. He turned and walked back to the cabin. When he knocked, Nayland opened the door immediately, the shotgun in her hands pointed at his chest. She lowered it when she saw him, but he noted that her finger had been on the trigger ready. "Good," he said, stepping inside. "You learn fast." "I learn or I die," Nayland said simply. "I prefer to learn." Jacob shrugged off his coat and hung it on the peg by the door. He was aware of both women watching him, waiting to see what he would decide. He walked to the fire and held his hands out to warm them, taking his time making them wait. Finally he spoke. "Those men coming up here, this Brennan and his crew, they're professional killers." "Yes," Nayland said. "And you got proof that could hang their boss?" "Yes." Jacob nodded slowly. "Then they won't stop. They can't. Ashford will pay them too much to let you live, and they'll kill anyone who gets in their way." "I know," Nayland said quietly. "That is why we should leave, before they come, before we bring death to your door." "Too late for that," Jacob said. He turned to face her. "Your tracks lead right to this cabin. They'll know you're here, and they'll burn me out if they have to, just to make sure you're dead. So now it's my fight whether I want it or not." "I am sorry," Nayland said. "Don't be sorry. Be useful." Jacob walked to his gun rack and pulled down a Winchester, checking its action. "You said your grandfather taught you to shoot." "Yes." "Show me." He handed her the rifle. Nayland took it, her hands finding the correct grip immediately. She sighted along the barrel at an imaginary target, her posture steady. Jacob watched critically, then nodded. "You'll do. How many rounds you fired in your life?" "Maybe 50. "Then you're a better shot than most men in the territory." "All right. When they come, you take the back window. I'll take the front. We got maybe 40 rounds between us. If we're smart, if we're lucky, that's enough." "And if we are not lucky?" Nayland asked. Jacob smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Then we die fighting, which is better than dying running. Trust me on that." The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. Jacob showed Nayland how to load the rifle, how to work the lever action, where to aim for maximum damage. She learned quickly, her fingers becoming more confident with each repetition. Rosa watched from her place by the fire, too weak to help, but following everything with alert eyes. They ate a sparse meal of dried meat and beans. Jacob was rationing his supplies now, calculating how long they could hold out if they were trapped in the cabin by more than just weather. 3 days, maybe 4 if they stretched it. After that, hunger would make them stupid, and stupid got you killed. As night fell, Jacob barricaded the door with his heavy oak table. He checked and rechecked the ammunition, making sure every round was accounted for. He positioned furniture near the windows to provide cover. He filled every container he had with water from melted snow, knowing that once the shooting started, they might not get another chance to leave the cabin. Nayland helped him silently, following his orders without question. Jacob found himself grateful for her presence, for the way she moved with purpose and intelligence. Rosa dozed by the fire, her breathing easier now, but still weak. When everything was ready, when there was nothing left to do but wait. Jacob sat down in his chair and picked up his rifle. Nayland sat across from him, her own weapon across her knees. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Tell me about your wife," Nayland said quietly. Jacob stiffened. "No." "You said you have been alone for 10 years. Something happened 10 years ago. Something happens every day. Don't make it into a story." "Everything is a story," Nayland said, "and I think yours is a sad one." Jacob was quiet for a long time, so long that Nayland probably thought he would not answer, but then, surprising himself, he spoke. "Her name was Martha. She was Cherokee. We met at Fort Verde when I was in the cavalry. I was 26. She was 23. She worked as a nurse, patching up soldiers who were too stupid to dodge bullets." He paused, staring into the fire. "I got shot in the leg during a skirmish with rustlers. She took care of me. I fell in love with the way she hummed while she worked, like she had a secret that made her happy." Nayland waited, not pushing, just listening. "We got married in 1870. Had a boy, Samuel, in 1873. Got a piece of land in Verde Valley, good land with a creek. Martha planted a garden. Samuel learned to ride before he could walk proper. It was— Jacob's voice caught. It was good. For 5 years it was good. What happened? I went hunting. 3 days tracking an elk. When I came back, he closed his eyes. The house was burned to the ground. Martha and Samuel inside. Sheriff said it was an accident, a knocked-over lamp. But I found things. An oil can that wasn't ours. Horse tracks. Shell casings. Someone had set that fire. Someone had murdered my family. Did you find them? Nayland asked. Found 2 of them. Killed them both in Tucson. The third one got away. Heard later he was working for a big man, someone with money and power. But I never got a name. Just rumors. Jacob opened his eyes and looked at Nalin. So I came up here. Figured if I was away from people, away from the world, it couldn't hurt me anymore. But you are hurt, Nayland said gently. You are hurt every day. Yes, Jacob admitted. But up here at least I know where the pain is coming from. They sat in silence after that, the weight of shared grief settling over them like snow. Rosa slept. The fire burned low. Outside the wind picked up again, promising another storm. And in that silence, something shifted between Jacob and Nalin. An understanding, perhaps, a recognition that they were both survivors of violence, both carrying wounds that would never fully heal. They were not friends, they were not allies, but they were, for now, 2 people trapped in the same storm, and that was enough. As midnight approached, Jacob finally spoke again. You should sleep. I'll keep watch. You need rest too, Nayland said. I'll sleep when I'm dead, which might be tomorrow, so I'm trying to put it off as long as possible. Nayland smiled at that same small smile that softened her fierce features. You are funny in a sad way again. It's a gift. She stood and walked to the pile of furs near the fire, settling down next to Rosa. But before she closed her eyes, she looked back at Jacob. Thank you for telling me about Martha, for letting me know you. Don't thank me yet, Jacob said. This ain't over. No, Nayland agreed. But whatever comes, I am glad we are not facing it alone. Jacob did not respond, but something in his chest, something that had been frozen for 10 years, cracked just a little. Not enough to thaw, not yet, but enough to let him feel the first faint possibility that maybe, just maybe, he was not as dead as he thought he was. The night deepened. The storm raged, and Jacob Stone sat by his window with his rifle across his knees, watching the darkness for movement, listening for the sound of horses and men. They would come. He knew it in his bones. They would come with guns and fire and the arrogance of men who thought might made right. But this time they would find more than a lonely cabin on a mountainside. They would find a man who had already lost everything, which made him the most dangerous kind of enemy. A man with nothing left to lose is a man who will fight until his last breath, and Jacob Stone still had plenty of breath left in him. He looked over at Nayland sleeping by the fire, her face peaceful in rest. He looked at Rosa breathing steadily, now healing slowly. And he made himself a promise. They had come to him for shelter. They had trusted him with their lives. And he would not fail them the way he had failed Martha and Samuel. Not this time. This time he would be there when the fire came. And this time he would make sure it burned the right people. The first light of dawn was still hours away when Jacob heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable to ears that had been trained by a decade of mountain silence. The sound of horses moving through snow. 4 of them, maybe a mile down the trail, coming slow but steady toward the cabin. They were here. Jacob stood and walked to where Nayland slept. He touched her shoulder, gentle but firm. She woke instantly, her hand going to the knife at her belt before she recognized him. They are coming, Jacob said quietly. Nayland nodded and rose, moving to wake Rosa. There was no panic in her movements, just calm purpose. Jacob felt something like respect stir in him. This woman had been raised right, taught to face danger without falling apart. How long? Nayland asked. Hour, maybe less. They're being careful, checking the trail, but they're coming. Then we will be ready. Jacob looked at her in the dim firelight. You scared? Yes, Nayland said honestly. But fear is just the body preparing to fight. My grandfather taught me that. Your grandfather was a smart man. He was. And he would have liked you, I think. You are both stubborn old mountain goats." Jacob almost laughed at that. Almost. Instead, he picked up his rifle and walked to the window. Behind him, he heard Nayland checking her weapon, heard Rosa struggle to her feet despite her wound. "Stay down," Jacob told Rosa. "You're in no shape to fight." "I can load," Rosa said. "My hands still work," Jacob nodded. "Fair enough. You load, we shoot." And so they waited, three people in a cabin built for one, listening to the sound of horses and men climbing closer through the pre-dawn darkness. Jacob felt his heartbeat slow, felt that familiar calm descend over him. It was the same feeling he had gotten before battles in his cavalry days, the same cold clarity that came from knowing that in a few minutes people would die. Maybe him, maybe them, maybe all of them, but if he was going to die, at least he would die for something other than his own loneliness. At least he would die protecting people who needed protecting. There was something almost peaceful in that thought. The sun began to rise, turning the snow from black to gray to blinding white. And there, at the edge of the clearing, 4 riders emerged from the tree line. They stopped silhouetted against the dawn, and for a moment everything was still. Then one of them raised his hand and pointed at the cabin. And Jacob Stone, who had spent 10 years trying to die slowly in the mountains, discovered that he was not quite ready to die after all. He raised his Winchester and sighted down the barrel, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. Next to him, Nayland did the same, her breathing steady and controlled. "Whatever happens," Jacob said quietly, "you fought like hell to survive. Your father would be proud." "And whatever happens," Nayland replied, "you stopped hiding and started living again. Your wife would be proud too." Jacob smiled a real smile this time. "Maybe. Now shut up and get ready to shoot." The riders began to move forward, spreading out as they approached the cabin. And in that moment, with the sun rising and the storm gathering strength again, and 4 killers closing in, Jacob Stone felt something he had not felt in 10 years. He felt alive. The first shot shattered the morning silence like breaking glass. Jacob fired through the narrow gap he had left in the barricaded window, and 400 yards down the slope, the lead rider jerked backward as if yanked by an invisible rope. He tumbled from his horse in a spray of red against white snow, his body hitting the ground and not moving again. 46 rounds left that rang through the cabin. The sound was oddly musical, almost cheerful, completely at odds with what it represented. Death had a rhythm, and Jacob remembered it well from his cavalry days. The percussion of gunfire, the brass bell notes of spent shells, the wet drum thud of bullets finding flesh. The 3 remaining riders scattered immediately, their horses dancing sideways in panic. These were not amateurs. They split up with practiced efficiency, 2 breaking left toward the tree line, 1 circling right toward a cluster of boulders. They were flanking, using the terrain, making themselves hard targets. "They are spreading out," Nayland said from her position at the back window. Her voice was steady, but Jacob could hear the tension underneath like a wire pulled tight. "Let them spread," Jacob said, tracking one of the riders through his sights. "Makes them think they got the advantage, but it also means they can't support each other. Pick your shots. Don't waste ammunition on maybes." A bullet punched through the log wall 2 feet from Jacob's head, sending splinters flying. Then another and another. The riders were returning fire now, not aimed shots, but suppression fire, trying to keep the defenders' heads down while they repositioned. Jacob heard Rosa gasp behind him, but did not turn around. He trusted Nayland to take care of her. "Stay low," Jacob barked. "They are just throwing lead around, hoping to get lucky." He waited patient, as stone watching through a gap between logs. Patience was the hunter's greatest weapon. The man who fired first was not always the man who won. The man who fired true was. There. One of the riders broke from cover, trying to make it to a better position behind a deadfall pine. Jacob led him by 3 feet, accounting for the distance and the wind, then squeezed the trigger. The Winchester kicked against his shoulder, and the rider's horse stumbled. Not the man, the horse. The animal went down hard, throwing its rider into the snow. "Damn," Jacob muttered. He had been aiming for the man. 45. But the result was the same. The fallen rider scrambled behind his dying horse, using the animal's body for cover. It bought him shelter, but trapped him in the open, pinned down 50 yards from the cabin. "I see one at the back," Nayland called out. "In the trees." "Can you hit him?" "I do not know. He is far." "Then don't try. Wait until you got a clean shot. I need you to make yours count." Jacob scanned the field of fire. 3 men left. One pinned behind a dead horse. One somewhere in the trees to the left. One behind boulders to the right. And somewhere among them, probably hanging back, was the tracker. The smart one. The dangerous one. As if summoning him by thought alone, a voice called out from the tree line. It was rough and wet, like stones grinding together, and it carried clearly through the cold morning air. "Stone, Jacob, stone that you up there!" Jacob did not answer. Talking gave away positions, and positions got you killed. The voice continued closer now. "I know it is you, old goat. I can smell your stink from here. 10 years hiding in the mountains like a coward, but you can't hide from me." Jacob's jaw tightened. The voice was trying to provoke him, make him angry, make him stupid. It was an old tactic, and Jacob had seen it work on better men than him. He had spent a decade learning patience, years learning to wait. "You got something that belongs to my employer," the voice went on. 2 women and a letter. Send them out, and I will let you live. You can go back to your hole and pretend the world doesn't exist. Isn't that what you want?" Jacob shifted his position slightly, trying to locate the speaker by sound. The voice was coming from the left, maybe 60 yards out, hidden in the pines. Still too far for a reliable shot through trees and snow. "Or maybe," the voice said, and now there was dark amusement in it, "maybe you remember me. Tucson, 1878. You killed my brother Stone. Shot him in the back like the coward you are. His name was Danny Brennan. And my name is Cade. I have been waiting 5 years for this." Jacob went very still. The 3rd man. The one who got away. He had always wondered if that ghost would come back to haunt him, and now here it was, made flesh and armed with a rifle. Behind him, he heard Naline's sharp intake of breath. "You know him." "I know him," Jacob said quietly. "After my family died, I tracked the men who did it, killed 2. He is the 3rd, the one I missed." "Then this is more than just Ashford's money," Nayland said. "This is revenge." "Everything is revenge if you dig deep enough." Jacob kept his eyes on the tree line. "Makes him predictable. Predictable is good. Predictable means mistakes." A bullet smashed through the window above Jacob's head, showering him with glass. He did not flinch, did not move. Another bullet, then another, methodical and controlled. Not random spray now. Someone was probing their defenses, testing their reactions. "Naline," Jacob said. "The one at your window. Is he moving?" She peered through her scope. "Yes, coming closer, maybe 40 yards now. When he gets to 30, you shoot. Don't think about it, just shoot." "I have never killed a man." "You will today, or he will kill you. Your choice." Jacob heard her breathing change, heard her settling into the shot. Good. She was learning. Fear was fine. Panic got you killed, but fear kept you sharp. The man pinned behind the dead horse made his move. He lunged from cover, trying to sprint for the cabin wall where the defenders could not get an angle on him. It was a good play, but he had waited too long. Jacob tracked him, led him, and fired. The man went down hard, clutching his leg, screaming. 44 rounds. He needed to make every shot count now. 2 down, 2 wounded. But wounded was almost worse than dead. Wounded men screamed, and screaming did things to people's heads. The back window exploded inward as Nayland fired her shotgun. The boom was deafening in the small cabin. Jacob mentally noted 2 shells spent. 4 left in the shotgun, and Rosa cried out in shock. Jacob risked a glance back and saw Nayland working the pump action, chambering another shell, her face pale but determined. "Did you hit him?" Jacob asked. "I think so. He fell." "Think or know?" "I do not know. I closed my eyes when I pulled the trigger." Jacob almost smiled. Don't do that next time. Hard to hit what you ain't looking at. From outside came a new sound, hoofbeats moving fast, circling around toward the back of the cabin. The fourth man, the one Jacob had not been tracking. Smart. While they were focused on the obvious threats, he was trying to flank them. "Nayland, back window now," Jacob snapped. "He is coming around." But even as he said it, he heard the heavy thud of boots on the cabin roof. The rider had not circled. He had dismounted and climbed. Now he was above them on the low, sloping roof, looking for a way in. The chimney. Jacob realized it a second before it happened. He grabbed the bucket of water by the wash basin and threw it into the roaring fireplace. A massive cloud of steam hissed upward, followed by a choking cloud of ash and smoke that billowed up the chimney like a fist. A man screamed above them, a raw sound of surprise and pain. Boots scrabbled on wood. Then a body slid down the icy roof and tumbled off the eave landing with a sickening crunch in the snow right in front of the window. Jacob did not hesitate. He smashed the remaining glass with the butt of his rifle and fired point blank. The man jerked once and went still. 43, 3 down. "Good shot," Nayland breathed. "Wasn't a shot. That was an execution." Jacob pulled back from the window, his heart hammering. The cabin was filling with smoke from the doused fire, thick and acrid. His eyes were watering, his lungs burning. "We need to move. Can't stay here with no fire and all this smoke." "Where?" Rosa asked. She had pressed herself against the far wall away from the windows, her face gray with pain and fear. "The root cellar. There is a tunnel comes out in the ravine behind the cabin. We go out the back way while they are still trying to figure out their next move." Nayland looked at the barricaded door, then at Rosa's wounded shoulder. "She cannot climb down a ladder. She will have to, or she stays here and dies." Jacob's voice was harsh, but there was no cruelty in it, just the brutal arithmetic of survival. "Your choice, Senora." Rosa pushed herself upright, using the wall for support. "I can climb. Help me up, mija." While Nalin helped Rosa to her feet, Jacob moved to the center of the room and kicked aside the braided rug. Underneath was a trapdoor barely visible in the rough pine floorboards. He had cut it himself 3 years ago during a particularly brutal winter when he had needed extra storage for root vegetables, but he had extended it, dug deeper, created an escape route, just in case. In the mountains, a man always needed a just in case. Jacob hauled the trapdoor open. A draft of cold, dank air rose up to meet them, smelling of earth and darkness. A ladder descended into blackness. "I will go first," Jacob said. "Then Rosa. Then you, Nayland. Bring the rifles and as much ammunition as you can carry." "What about them?" Nayland gestured toward the windows. "They will see us leave." "Not if we give them something else to look at." Jacob grabbed the oil lamp from the table and splashed its contents across the floorboards near the door. Then he took a burning piece of wood from the dying fireplace and tossed it onto the oil. Flames caught immediately, spreading fast, licking up the dry wood. "They will think we are trapped," Jacob explained. "Think we are burning. By the time they figure out different, we will be gone." He swung onto the ladder and descended quickly into the root cellar. It was cramped and dark, barely tall enough to stand in, with walls of packed earth supported by rough timber. But at the far end, he could see the faint gray light of the exit tunnel. Rosa came down next, slow and painful, each rung of the ladder drawing a gasp from her. Nayland descended behind her rifle, slung over her shoulder, bullets weighing down her pockets. Above them, the fire was spreading. Jacob could hear the crackle and pop of burning wood, could see orange light dancing through the gaps in the floorboards. Smoke poured down through the trap door. "Move," Jacob ordered. "Tunnel was tight. Stay low, stay quiet." They crawled through the darkness, Jacob leading, feeling his way along walls of frozen earth. The tunnel was barely 3 feet high, forcing them to move on hands and knees. Rosa whimpered, with each movement her wounded shoulder screaming, but she did not stop. Tough woman. Jacob respected that. Behind them they heard a muffled shout. The men outside had seen the fire. They would be cautious at first, suspecting a trap, but eventually they would move in to check for bodies. And when they found the tunnel exit, they would know. The tunnel opened into a ravine behind the cabin, a natural cut in the rock hidden by scrub pine and snow drifts. Jacob emerged first, rifle ready, scanning for threats. The ravine was empty. Above them on the ridge he could see smoke rising from his burning cabin. 10 years of his life going up in flames. Everything he owned, everything he had built, he felt nothing. Possessions were just weight. The only thing that mattered was staying alive long enough to make the men who brought this down on him pay for it. Nalin helped Rosa out of the tunnel, then climbed out herself. They huddled in the ravine, each exhale turning to mist, waiting to see what came next. "Now what?" Nalin whispered. "Now we become the hunters," Jacob said. He pointed to a stand of trees 50 yards away. "They're horses. 4 horses for 3 men. We take the horses, we take their mobility." "You want to steal their horses?" Nalin looked at him like he was insane. "They will shoot us." "Only if they see us. And they won't, because they're all watching the cabin burn, thinking we are inside. Come on." Jacob moved through the snow with the practiced silence of a man who had spent years stalking game. His body remembered the old skills, the way to place his feet to avoid crunching snow, the way to use terrain and shadow to remain invisible. Nalin followed, learning as she went, and Rosa stayed behind, hidden in the ravine, conserving her strength. The horses were tied in a grove of aspen downwind of the cabin, so they would not spook from gunfire. 3 animals, not 4. The dead rider's horse was still lying in the snow near the cabin. Jacob counted that as a blessing. 3 horses for 2 people was better odds. He could hear voices now coming from the direction of the cabin. Cade Brennan's rough growl, another voice responding. They were arguing about whether to approach the burning structure. "Wait until it collapses," Brennan was saying. "Then we dig through the ashes and make sure." "What if they got out?" the other voice asked. "Then we track them. Fresh snow, 2 women, and an old man." How far could they get? Jacob felt a grim satisfaction. Old man. They were underestimating him. Good. Underestimation was a gift that kept on giving. He crept closer to the horses, moving from tree to tree. The animals sensed him and shifted nervously, but he made soft clicking sounds, the same sounds he had used to calm his own horses years ago. Horses were herd animals. They responded to confidence and calm. Nalin emerged from the trees on the other side, approaching from the opposite angle. Smart girl. She was thinking tactically now, using what she had learned. Jacob caught her eye and gestured. She nodded and moved to the nearest horse, beginning to untie it from the picket line. That was when the 3rd man stepped out from behind a boulder not 10 feet from Nalin. He had stayed behind to guard the horses while the others checked the cabin. Smart, disciplined, dangerous. He was a big man, red-haired and red-bearded, with a face like a side of beef left in the sun too long. He carried a sawed-off shotgun, and when he saw Nalin, his surprise lasted only a fraction of a second before training took over. He raised the weapon. "Don't move, little bird, or I scatter you all over these trees." Nalin froze, hand still on the rope. Her rifle was slung across her back, useless. The man grinned, showing yellow teeth. "Well now, looks like Christmas came early. The boss is going to be real pleased when I bring you back. You and that letter. Where's your friend, the old man?" "Dead," Nalin said, her voice steady. "In the fire." "That's so." The red-haired man took a step closer. "Shame. I wanted to watch him burn, but you'll do for now. Turn around slow. No sudden moves." Jacob stepped out from behind the nearest tree, his Colt .45 leveled at the man's head. She said, "Turn around slow. You should listen to her." The red-haired man spun, trying to bring the shotgun around, but he was too slow. Jacob had spent 10 years practicing the draw, 10 years, with nothing to do but perfect the simple act of putting metal on target. The Colt barked once loud as thunder in the morning air. 11 rounds left in the Colt. He hoped he wouldn't need them all. The red-haired man dropped like a puppet with cut strings, the back of his head gone. Nalin stood very still, her face spattered with blood that was not hers. She was breathing hard, her eyes wide with shock. "First time seeing someone die up close?" Jacob asked, already moving to untie the horses. "Yes. Gets easier. Don't know if that's good or bad, but it does get easier. Help me with these ropes." They worked quickly, knowing the gunshot would bring the others. Jacob heard shouts from the direction of the cabin, heard boots running through snow. He got 2 horses untied and slapped one on the rump, sending it running back toward Rosa's position in the ravine. "Mount up," he told Nayland. "We ride hard circle around, pick up Rosa." "What about them?" Nayland swung into the saddle, her movements clumsy but effective. "Let them chase us on foot for a while. See how they like it." Jacob mounted the second horse just as the first bullet whined past his head. He kicked the animal hard, and it lunged forward, crashing through the underbrush. Behind him, Nayland followed, bent low over her horse's neck. More shots, but they were firing blind through trees, and moving targets were hard to hit. Jacob led them in a wide arc, using the terrain, always keeping cover between them and the shooters. He could hear Brennan screaming orders, could hear the frustration in the man's voice. They found Rosa where they had left her, pale and shaking, but alive. Jacob pulled her up behind him on the horse, feeling her arms wrap around his waist. She was light, too light. The wound and the cold were draining her strength. "Hold on," Jacob told her. "We got some hard riding ahead." They fled down the mountain, the horses finding their footing on snow-covered rock, with the sure instinct of animals that had been bred for this terrain. Behind them, the sound of pursuit faded. 2 men on foot could not keep pace with 3 on horseback, not through this country. Jacob led them deep into the mountains, into places he knew like the back of his hand. Secret valleys and hidden canyons, places where a man could disappear if he knew where to step. They rode for an hour, maybe more, until Rosa slumped against his back, and he knew she could go no farther. He found a cave, an ancient thing carved by water and time into the side of a limestone cliff. The entrance was hidden behind a frozen waterfall, invisible unless you knew it was there. Jacob had used it before years ago when a late spring storm had caught him away from his cabin. They dismounted and led the horses inside. The cave was small but dry, and the back wall still showed the faint traces of ancient paintings. Apache symbols, Nayland said when she saw them. Her people had been here long ago, had sheltered in this same place. Jacob built a small fire using deadwood he found deeper in the cave, keeping the flames tiny to minimize smoke. Rosa collapsed near it, her face gray with exhaustion. Nayland knelt beside her, checking the shoulder wound. "It is bleeding again," Nayland said quietly. The writing opened it up. "Can you stop it?" "I can try. But she needs a real doctor. Stitches, medicine, clean bandages." Jacob nodded. "Town is 20 miles from here, Copper Springs. We can make it by tomorrow if we push." "And Brennan?" Nayland asked. "He will follow." "Let him follow. He is on foot now, and I know this mountain. He does not. We got the advantage." Jacob moved to the cave entrance and looked out at the failing light. Afternoon was sliding into evening, and with it came the promise of more cold. The sky was heavy with clouds, pregnant with snow. Another storm was coming. Good. Snow would cover their tracks slow, their pursuers. He turned back to find Nayland watching him, her dark eyes thoughtful. "You saved my life," she said, "with the red-haired man. You would have figured something out." "No, I was frozen. I was going to die." She paused. "Thank you." Jacob shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "You got good survival instincts. Just need practice. My father used to say that fear is the body preparing to fight, but he never taught me what to do when the fight actually comes. You did fine. Better than fine. You pulled that trigger when it mattered, and you did not fall apart after. That's more than most men can say their first time." Nayland looked down at her hands. They were shaking just slightly, the adrenaline finally wearing off. "I keep seeing his face, the red-haired man, the way he looked when—" "Don't." Jacob's voice was firm. "Don't go down that road. You start thinking about the men you killed as people, you will drive yourself crazy. He was trying to kill you. You survived. That's all the story needs to be." Is that what you tell yourself about the men you have killed? Jacob was quiet for a long moment. No, I remember everyone. But I am crazy, so my way probably ain't the best example to follow. That surprised a laugh out of Nalin, short and sharp. Rosa stirred at the sound, then opened her eyes. Are we safe? She asked. For now, Jacob said. Rest while you can. We move again at first light. Where are we going? Town. You need a doctor, and we need to get that letter to someone who can use it. Federal marshal, maybe, or the territorial governor. Someone with enough power that Ashford can't buy them off. Rosa reached into her bodice and pulled out a folded envelope, heavy paper sealed with red wax. This is what they killed for. Miguel's life, Mangus's life, all the others. She held it out to Jacob. Take it. If something happens to me, someone needs to know. Jacob took the letter reluctantly, feeling the weight of it in his hands. It was just paper and ink, but it represented lives and deaths, justice and corruption. The kind of thing that complicated men got themselves killed over. Nothing is going to happen to you, he said. We are all going to live long enough to see Ashford hang. You cannot promise that. No, but I can promise that if I am still breathing, I will do everything in my power to make it true. Rosa smiled weakly. You are a good man, Senor Stone. Better than you think you are. Jacob looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Get some sleep. As darkness fell, Jacob sat by the tiny fire and watched the two women rest. Nayland had curled up near Rosa, her hand on the older woman's arm, protective even in sleep. They looked peaceful despite everything, despite the violence and the fear and the cold. Jacob pulled out the letter and examined it by firelight. The seal was unbroken, but he could see writing through the thin paper. Elegant script, the handwriting of an educated man. Cornelius Ashford. Jacob had never met the man, but he knew the type. Rich, powerful, certain that money could buy anything, including murder. 5 years ago, Ashford had sent men to burn Jacob's farm, to kill Martha and Samuel. And now, all these years later, the ghost of that crime had circled back around. Fate or coincidence, it did not matter. What mattered was that Jacob finally had a name for the man who had destroyed his life. He thought about opening the letter, reading the damning words inside. But something stopped him. This was not his justice to claim. It belonged to Nayland and Rosa, to Mangus and Miguel, to all the people Ashford had crushed under the wheels of his empire. Jacob was just the instrument, the weapon they wielded. That was enough. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and silent. Jacob added another piece of wood to the fire and settled back against the cave wall rifle across his knees. His body ached from the fighting and the writing, but his mind was clear. For the first time since Martha's death, he had a purpose beyond simple survival. He had something worth fighting for. He looked at Nalin sleeping in the firelight and thought about what she had said earlier, that he had stopped hiding and started living again. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was what living felt like, messy and violent and full of risk, but alive, actually alive. Martha would have approved. She had always said that hiding from pain just created a different kind of pain. You had to face it, feel it, move through it. That was the only way to heal. Jacob closed his eyes just for a moment and whispered into the darkness, I am sorry I was not there to save you. Sorry I failed. But I got a chance now to make it right, to stop the man who did it. I hope that counts for something. The fire crackled. The wind howled. And in the silence that followed, Jacob Stone allowed himself to believe that maybe somewhere Martha heard him, and maybe, just maybe, she forgave him. He opened his eyes to find Nayland watching him from across the fire. She said nothing, but her expression was soft understanding. She had heard him talking to the dead, and she did not judge him for it. Get some rest, she said quietly. I will keep watch for a while. You need sleep more than I do. So do you. But you will not sleep anyway, will you? You will sit there all night waiting for ghosts that are not coming." Jacob almost smiled. "You got me figured out, do you? I know grief, and I know stubbornness. You have both in equal measure." "That's supposed to be a compliment?" "It is an observation. Now sleep, or at least pretend to. Give your body a rest, even if your mind will not cooperate." Jacob found himself obeying, settling into a more comfortable position, letting his muscles relax. He did not expect to sleep, but exhaustion was a powerful drug, and before he realized it, his eyes were closing. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Nayland sitting by the fire rifle across her knees, watching the cave entrance with the fierce determination of a woman who would not let death catch them unaware. And for the first time since 1873, Jacob Stone slept without nightmares. He woke to find pale morning light filtering through the frozen waterfall at the cave entrance. His body was stiff and sore, but his mind was clear. Nayland had kept watch all night, he realized. She sat in the same position, though her eyes were heavy with fatigue. "You should have woken me," Jacob said. "You needed the rest more." "Stubborn woman." "Stubborn man." They smiled at each other, a moment of shared understanding. Then Rosa stirred, and the moment passed, replaced by the practical concerns of survival. "How is she?" Jacob asked. "The fever is worse. We need to get her to town today." Jacob nodded and moved to check the horses. The animals had survived the night well, still strong enough to make the journey. He rationed out the last of his dried meat and shared it among the three of them. It was not enough, but it would have to be. They broke camp quickly, efficiently, moving with the practiced coordination of people who had learned to trust each other under fire. Rosa was weak but conscious, and with help, she managed to mount behind Nayland. Jacob led them out of the cave and down the mountain, choosing paths that would be hard to follow, always keeping to cover. The snow had stopped, but the sky remained heavy and gray, promising more to come. They rode in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Jacob's mind was already in Copper Springs, planning their approach. The town was controlled by Ashford's money, that much was certain. The sheriff would be bought. The wealthy citizens would look the other way. Justice would not come easy. But Jacob had a letter, and he had 2 witnesses, and he had nothing left to lose except his life, which had not seemed very valuable until 3 days ago. Sometimes the most dangerous man in a fight was not the strongest or the fastest. It was the one who had already died inside and was just waiting for his body to catch up. Jacob had been that man for 10 years. But now, with Nayland and Rosa depending on him with a chance at real justice instead of hollow revenge, he found himself caring again, caring whether he lived or died, caring what happened to these women, caring about something bigger than his own pain. It was terrifying, and it was wonderful. As they descended toward Copper Springs, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days, turning the snow into a field of diamonds. Jacob took it as a sign, not from God maybe, but from the mountain itself, a blessing for the fight ahead. "Almost there," he said, pointing to the smoke of chimneys visible in the valley below. "You ready for this?" Nayland looked at him, her dark eyes fierce and determined. "I am ready to finish what my father started. I am ready to make Ashford pay." "Good," Jacob said, "because once we ride into that town, there is no going back. We see this through to the end, whatever that end might be." "Whatever the end might be," Nayland agreed. And together, 3 survivors of violence, 3 people who had lost everything and found each other in the storm, rode down from the mountains toward justice or death or something in between. The mountain wind followed them, cold and fierce like the breath of all the ghosts they carried on their backs. Copper Springs emerged from the valley floor like a wound in the snow, a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a main street that had been carved into the frozen earth by ambition and copper money. Smoke rose from 100 chimneys, gray fingers reaching toward the heavy sky. The town was bigger than Jacob remembered, swollen with prosperity, built on the backs of miners who dug into the earth 16 hours a day for wages that barely kept them alive. It was early afternoon when the three riders appeared at the edge of town, and they made quite a sight. Jacob's stone beard wild and matted with ice, his bearskin coat torn and blood-stained, Nayland, her Apache dress visible beneath a stolen coat, her face set with fierce determination, and Rosa Delgado slumped behind Nalin, barely conscious her skin the color of old parchment. People stopped in the street to stare. Whispers followed them like smoke. A woman clutched her child closer. A man spat in the snow and turned away. In a town owned by Cornelius Ashford, strangers were not welcome, and dangerous strangers were cause for alarm. Jacob guided his horse toward the marshal's office, a squat building with barred windows and a sign that hung crooked on rusted hinges. But before they could reach it, a voice called out from the boardwalk. "Well, well, Jacob Stone? I heard you were dead." Jacob turned to see a man in his late 60s, white-haired and thin as a rail, wearing a coat that had seen better decades. Samuel Mackenzie, called Red for the color his hair had been 40 years ago, stood with one hand on a porch post, grinning like a wolf. "Red," Jacob said, surprise and relief flooding through him. "What in the hell are you doing in town? Could ask you the same question, old friend. Last I heard you were still playing hermit up on Cedar Ridge." Red's sharp eyes took in Nalin and Rosa, the bloodstains, the exhaustion. "Looks like trouble found you." "Trouble found all of us," Jacob said. He dismounted and helped Nalin get Rosa down from the horse. The older woman's legs buckled immediately, and Jacob had to catch her. "We need a doctor, now!" Red was already moving his age, not slowing him down. "Doc Yates, 2 buildings down. Follow me." He led them quickly along the boardwalk, shouting ahead. "Doc, got a patient bleeding out. Move your ass." The doctor's office was small and cluttered, smelling of carbolic acid and whiskey. Dr. Yates was a compact man in his 50s, with steady hands and eyes that had seen every kind of wound the frontier could produce. He took one look at Rosa and pointed to a table. "Get her up there. How long has she been shot?" 3 days, Nalin said, helping Jacob lift Rosa onto the table. 3 days. Yates shook his head. "Infection set in. I can see it from here. This is going to be close." He looked at Jacob and Red. "You two out. Girl, you stay. I need hands." Jacob started to protest, but Nayland cut him off. "Go. I will help him." Red pulled Jacob out into the street, closing the door behind them. They stood on the boardwalk, their breath visible in clouds, and for a moment neither spoke. Then Red looked at his old friend with eyes that had seen too much. "You want to tell me what the hell is going on? Last time I checked, you were still playing dead up on that mountain." Jacob told him, not everything, but enough. The 2 women fleeing from killers, the siege of the cabin, the letter that could hang Cornelius Ashford. With each detail, Red's expression grew darker. "Ashford," Red said finally, "damn, you picked a fight with the biggest bastard in the territory." "I did not pick anything. It picked me." "Same result either way." Red spat into the snow. "You know Sheriff Wade is in Ashford's pocket, right? Has been for years. You walk into his office with that letter, you will be dead before sunset. I figured as much, that while you're in town keeping an eye on corruption." Red laughed, a dry sound like wind through dead leaves. "I am in town because my cabin burned down 2 weeks ago and I got nowhere else to go. Been sleeping in the livery doing odd jobs for whiskey money, not exactly a hero's tale. Your cabin burned, electrical storm, lightning strike, unlike yours, which I am guessing did not burn by accident." "No, that was intentional. Molotov cocktails and bad intentions." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the town move around them. Copper Springs was busy even in winter. Miners trudging to and from the pits, merchants hawking goods, women in respectable dresses hurrying past with their eyes down, not wanting to see too much. "We need to get word to someone who can help," Jacob said. "Federal marshal, maybe, or the territorial governor." "Good luck with that. Nearest federal marshal is in Santa Fe, 2 weeks' ride in good weather. And the governor," Red snorted, Ashford probably has him on the payroll too. You are talking about a man who owns 3 copper mines, 2 railroads, and half the politicians in the territory. You can't fight that kind of power with a letter and hope. Then what do I fight it with? Red looked at him, and something shifted in the old man's expression, something that might have been respect. You fight it the old way. You make enough noise that people can't ignore it anymore. You get the common folk on your side. Miners, shopkeepers, farmers, the people Ashford has been grinding under his boot. You give them a reason to stand up. And how do I do that? You tell the truth, loud and public where everyone can hear it. Church would be best. Father Miguel runs services every Sunday, big crowd. Can't bribe everyone in the congregation. Jacob considered this. It was risky, very risky. But Red was right about one thing. A letter could be stolen or destroyed. But truth once spoken in front of witnesses could not be unspoken. When is the next service? Tomorrow, Sunday morning. That fast? You got a better plan. Jacob did not. We need to stay alive until then, and we need to keep that letter safe. I got a place, Red said. Old mining shack on the edge of town. Nobody uses it anymore. Not fancy, but it is. Got walls and a roof. Good enough. The door to the doctor's office opened, and Nayland stepped out. Her hands were clean, but Jacob could see blood on her sleeves. Her face was drawn with exhaustion. She will live, Nayland said. The doctor removed the bullet fragments and cleaned the wound, but she is very weak. She needs days of rest, maybe weeks. She has got 1 night, Jacob said. Tomorrow we move. Nayland started to protest, but Red interrupted. He is right, girl. The longer you stay in one place, the easier you are to find. Brennan is still out there, and he will be heading for town same as you did, probably already here, asking questions. Then we are trapped, Nayland said. If Brennan is in town and the sheriff works for Ashford, we have nowhere to run. We do not run, Jacob said. Well, we stand and fight. But we do it smart. We do it public. Tomorrow in church we tell everyone what Ashford has done. We show them the letter. We give them the truth. And then we see if there are still any good people left in this town. If there are, they will protect us. If not, Jacob shrugged. Well, at least we went down swinging. Nayland looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. My father would have approved of this plan. He always said the only thing stronger than money is truth. Your father was an optimist. No, he was Apache. We know how to fight when the odds are against us. Red led them through the back streets of Copper Springs, avoiding the main thoroughfares where curious eyes would note their passing. The mining shack he had mentioned was at the very edge of town, a leaning structure of weathered wood that looked like a strong wind might knock it over. But inside it was dry and reasonably warm, with a small stove and enough space for them to spread out. Jacob helped Nalene carry Rosa inside and laid her on a pile of old blankets. The doctor had given them laudanum for the pain, and Rosa had already slipped into a drugged sleep, her breathing shallow but steady. She will be all right here, Nayland asked, looking around the shabby interior with doubt. She will be all right anywhere long as we keep her warm and hidden, Jacob said. He turned to Red. We need supplies. Food, ammunition, medical supplies if you can get them without raising questions. I know a few people who owe me favors, Red said. Give me an hour. He paused at the door. You know this is crazy, right? Taking on Ashford in his own town. I know. Good. Just wanted to make sure we were all clear on that. Red grinned and disappeared into the afternoon shadows. Alone with Nalene, for the first time since the cave, Jacob felt the weight of the silence between them. She sat on a crate near Rosa, watching the older woman sleep, her profile etched in the weak light from the single grimy window. You are afraid, Jacob said. It was not a question. Yes, Nayland admitted. My father was a great leader, but even he could not stand against the power of men like Ashford. And I am just one woman. You are not just anything. You survived 3 days in a blizzard with killers on your trail. You learned to shoot in an afternoon. You did not fall apart when men died in front of you. That is not just anything. Nayland looked at him, and in her eyes, Jacob saw the reflection of his own losses. What if it is not enough? What if we tell the truth and no one cares? Then we tried. That is more than most people can say, and if we die tomorrow, at least we die having fought for something real. That is more than I have had in 10 years. Do you really believe that dying for something is better than living for nothing? Jacob thought about Martha and Samuel, about the decade he had spent in the mountains, waiting to stop breathing. I used to think living was enough, just the act of waking up each day and not dying. But you and Rosa, you reminded me that there is more to life than just surviving. There is purpose, there is justice, there is the chance to make things right. Nayland stood and walked to where Jacob sat against the wall. She lowered herself beside him close enough that their shoulders touched. The contact sent a warmth through Jacob that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Tell me about your wife," Nayland said softly. "You said her name was Martha, but you never told me what she was like." Jacob closed his eyes, and for once the memory did not hurt as much as it used to. "She was Cherokee, strong, smarter than me by half. She could read, which was rare for women back then, especially native women. Used to read me poems from a book her mother gave her. I did not understand half of what they meant, but I loved listening to her voice. She sounds wonderful." She was, and patient. Lord, was she patient. Had to be putting up with me. I was younger then, angrier. Thought the world owed me something because I had fought in the war. Martha taught me that the world did not owe anyone anything, but that did not mean you stopped fighting for what was right. "Your son," Nayland prompted gently. "Samuel. Samuel was 7 when he died. Looked just like his mother. Had her eyes her smile. He wanted to be a doctor when he grew up. Used to practice bandaging on our dog." Jacob's voice caught. "He would have been 17 now, almost a man." Nayland took his hand, her fingers warm and strong. "They would be proud of you, for helping us, for standing up to Ashford. I failed them once. I was not there when they needed me. You are here now, for Rosa, for me. That counts for something." Jacob looked down at their joined hands and realized that for the first time in a decade, he did not feel completely alone. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it had shifted somehow, made room for something else. Not happiness exactly, but maybe the possibility of it. "When this is over," Nayland said, "what will you do? Where will you go?" "I do not know. My cabin is gone. My old life is gone. Maybe I will build something new, or maybe I will just keep moving until something stops me." "You could come with us, to San Carlos. There are good people there who would welcome you." Jacob almost laughed. "Me, a white soldier living on an Apache reservation, that would go over well." "You are not just a white soldier. You are the man who helped avenge my father, who risked everything to protect us. That means something to my people. I will think about it," Jacob said, though he knew he probably would not. He was too old, too broken, too used to being alone. But it was nice to be asked, nice to know that someone wanted him around. Red returned as the sun was setting, carrying a burlap sack filled with supplies. Bread, dried meat, coffee, a bottle of whiskey. He also had a box of ammunition and a clean shirt for Nayland, who was still wearing her blood-stained dress. "Got some news, too," Red said, setting the sack down. "Brennan and his last man rode into town about an hour ago. They're at the Silver Dollar Saloon asking questions. Sheriff Wade met with them. Looked friendly." "How long before they find us?" Jacob asked. "Hard to say. Town's got maybe 500 people. We are on the edge out of the way. If we keep our heads down, we might make it to morning. And if we do not, then we have a fight on our hands tonight instead of tomorrow." Red pulled a revolver from his coat and checked the cylinder. "Either way, I am in. Ashford's men burned my cabin. That makes this personal." Jacob looked at the old man with new appreciation. "You do not have to do this. This is not your fight. The hell it is not. I have lived in this territory for 40 years, watched it grow from nothing into something, and I have watched men like Ashford turn it rotten from the inside. Maybe I can't stop that, but I can make sure at least one of them pays for what he has done." They ate in silence as darkness fell, each lost in their own thoughts. Rosa woke briefly long enough to sip some water and eat a few bites of bread before the laudanum pulled her back under. Nalin changed into the clean shirt Red had brought, washing the blood from her arms with water heated on the stove. Jacob stood watch at the window, rifle in hand, scanning the street for movement. The town was settling in, for the night lights winking out one by one, leaving only the saloons and the marshal's office lit. Somewhere out there, Cade Brennan was planning his next move. Jacob could feel it the way a man could feel a storm coming before the first drops of rain. "Get some sleep," he told the others. "I will take first watch." "You need rest too," Nayland said. "I will rest when I am dead, which might be soon, so I am trying to delay it as long as possible." Red chuckled at that and settled into a corner, pulling his coat around him like a blanket. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep. Nayland lay down near Rosa, one hand resting protectively on the older woman's arm. The hours crept by. Midnight came and went. The temperature dropped, and frost formed on the inside of the window. Jacob kept his vigil, watching, waiting, remembering. He thought about Martha, about the way she had looked in the morning light, her hair loose and wild around her shoulders. He thought about Samuel's laugh, high and pure and full of joy. He thought about the farm in Verde Valley, the creek running clear and cold, the garden Martha had planted with such care. All gone, ashes and memory. But maybe, just maybe, he could keep these two women from suffering the same fate. Maybe he could give them the justice he had never been able to claim for his own family. Maybe that would be enough to quiet the ghosts that haunted his dreams. Around 2 in the morning, Jacob saw movement in the street, 2 figures walking purposefully toward the edge of town, toward the mining shack. They were still 100 yards away, but even in the darkness, Jacob recognized the shape of Cade Brennan. They had been found. Jacob moved quickly, shaking Red and Nayland awake. "They are coming. 2 men, maybe 3 minutes out." Red was on his feet instantly, his old soldier's instincts taking over. Nalin grabbed her rifle, her face pale but determined. Rosa did not wake, lost in her drugged sleep. "We cannot fight here," Red said. "Too exposed, and if they burn us out, Rosa dies for sure." "Then we do not fight here," Jacob said. "We lead them away, make them follow us." "To where?" "The church. Father Miguel's church. It will be unlocked. We hole up there, make our stand on holy ground. Maybe that will make them think twice about murdering us in front of God." "You put a lot of faith in the sanctity of churches," Red said dryly. "I put faith in stone walls and high windows. The sanctity is just a bonus." They moved fast, Jacob carrying Rosa in his arms, Nalin and Red covering their retreat. They slipped out the back of the shack and into the maze of alleys that ran behind Copper Springs Main Street. Behind them, Jacob heard the crash of a door being kicked in, heard Brennan's curse as he found the shack empty. The church was at the far end of town, a modest structure of adobe and wood with a bell tower that rose into the night sky. Father Miguel had built it with his own hands, they said, spending 5 years hauling stone and shaping beams. It was the pride of Copper Springs, the one place where Ashford's money could not buy influence. The door was indeed unlocked. Jacob kicked it open and carried Rosa inside, laying her gently on a pew near the front. The interior was simple but beautiful, lit by moonlight streaming through stained glass windows that must have cost Father Miguel years of savings. "Bar the door," Jacob ordered. Red obeyed, dropping a heavy beam into place. Nalin moved to the windows, checking sight lines. "They will surround us," she said. "We will be trapped." "We are already trapped," Jacob said. "At least here we have witnesses." "Witnesses?" Red looked around the empty church. "It is the middle of the night. No one is here." "They will be. Once the shooting starts, people will come. That is human nature. And when they do, we tell them everything. Show them the letter. Make Ashford's crimes public." "Assuming we live long enough," Red muttered. "Assuming that, yes." They did not have to wait long. Within minutes they heard boots on the boardwalk outside, heard men's voices conferring. Then Brennan's voice loud and clear. "Stone, I know you are in there. Come out and this ends clean. Stay inside and we burn you out. Again." Jacob moved to a window and called back. "You are standing in front of a church, Brennan. That does not bother you. God stopped caring about me a long time ago. Figure I will just add one more sin to the pile. And the people of this town, you going to murder 3 people in front of them. What people? It is the middle of the night. No one cares what happens to strangers." Jacob smiled grimly. "Then let us wake them up." He aimed his rifle at the church bell hanging in the tower and fired. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, and the bell rang with a deep, resonant tone. 42 rounds left in the Winchester. "Keep ringing it," Jacob told Nayland. "Every 30 seconds, wake everyone up." Nayland grinned fiercely and fired her shotgun at the bell. Boom! The bell sang. She pumped the action. Boom! Again. 3 shells left in the shotgun, but the sound was doing its job. Lights appeared in windows across town. Each shot made the bell sing a clarion call that could not be ignored. Lights began appearing in windows. Doors opened. People stepped out onto the street in their night clothes, confused and alarmed. Brennan cursed and fired at the church door, but the thick wood held. "Stop shooting that damn bell! Come in and make me," Jacob called back. More people were gathering now, drawn by the gunfire and the ringing bell. Jacob could see them clustering in the street, maybe 20, maybe 30, their faces confused and frightened. Good. Fear made people pay attention. The church door shook as someone threw their weight against it, but the bar held. Another crash, then another. Wood splintered, but did not break. "Father Miguel," a woman's voice called from outside. "What is happening?" "That is not Father Miguel," another voice answered. "Someone is in the church." Jacob moved to a side window where he could be seen and opened it. "My name is Jacob Stone. I am in here with 2 women who are fleeing from murderers hired by Cornelius Ashford." The crowd went silent. Then the murmurs started spreading like ripples in water. "Stone is lying," Brennan shouted. "He is a wanted criminal. I am here on behalf of the law." "Then why are you kicking in a church door?" Jacob shouted back. "Why are you not going through the sheriff?" "The sheriff knows I am here." "I bet he does." Jacob held up the letter so the crowd could see it. "I have proof. Written proof that Ashford hired killers, that he murdered Chieftain Mangas and Miguel Delgado, that he has been stealing land and lives for years." The crowd was larger now, maybe 50 people, and more coming every minute. Jacob saw shopkeepers and miners, wives and children, even a few of the town's more respectable citizens in expensive coats. And then, pushing through the crowd, came Father Miguel Santos himself, still in his nightshirt, but with a coat thrown over it. He was a compact man, barrel-chested and strong, with gray hair, and the weathered face of someone who had spent his youth working under the Mexican sun. "Stop," the priest commanded, and his voice carried such authority that even Brennan paused. "What is the meaning of this? Why are you attacking my church?" "These people are criminals, Father," Brennan said smoothly. "I have been hired to bring them to justice." "Hired by who?" "By concerned citizens who want order maintained." "By Cornelius Ashford, you mean," Father Miguel said, and there was no warmth in his voice. "I know who signs your paychecks, Senor Brennan. Everyone in town knows." "Then you know I have the authority to do what needs doing. You have no authority in the house of God. Only He has authority here, and I do not believe He approves of murder." Father Miguel turned to the crowd. "Light torches. Surround this church. Bear witness to what happens here. And if this man tries to harm anyone inside, you will all testify to it." Jacob felt something loosen in his chest. Red was right. There were still good people in Copper Springs, people who could not be bought or intimidated, people who remembered what justice actually meant. Brennan saw his advantage slipping away. "Father, you do not understand. These people have information that could damage important men who keep this town prosperous. Prosperity built on lies and murder is no prosperity at all," Father Miguel said. "It is damnation with a fresh coat of paint." The crowd murmured agreement. Brennan looked around, saw the torches being lit, saw the witnesses gathering, and knew he had lost, for tonight at least. "This is not over," Brennan said, backing away. "Ashford will hear about this, and when he does you will all regret standing against him." "Let him hear," Father Miguel said, "and let him come himself if he has grievances. I would very much like to speak with Senor Ashford about his business practices." Brennan and his remaining man disappeared into the shadows, but Jacob knew they had not gone far. They would regroup, report back to Ashford, wait for new orders. The night had been won, but the war was far from over. Father Miguel approached the church door. "Senor Stone, may I come in?" "It is your church, Father," Jacob called back. "We are just borrowing it." Red lifted the bar, and the priest entered. He looked around at the three defenders and the unconscious woman on the pew, taking in the situation with quick, intelligent eyes. "So," he said, "tell me everything, and do not lie. I have heard every kind of story there is, and I can smell falsehood, like I can smell sin." They told him, not just about the past few days, but about everything. Nalin spoke of her father's murder, her voice steady and clear. Rosa woke long enough to tell of her husband's death, of the letter she had found. Jacob added his own story, the fire that had taken Martha and Samuel, the connection to Ashford that he had only recently discovered. When they finished, Father Miguel sat in silence for a long moment, his hands clasped in prayer. Then he looked up, and his eyes were hard as flint. "Tomorrow," he said, "I will call an emergency service. Everyone in town will come. And you will tell this story again in front of witnesses where it cannot be denied or hidden. And then we will see if there is any justice left in Copper Springs." "Ashford will not let that happen," Red warned. "Ashford does not control what happens in my church," Father Miguel said, "and tomorrow the whole town will know what kind of man their benefactor really is." Jacob felt something that might have been hope stirring in his chest. It was fragile and small, but it was there. "Thank you, Father. Do not thank me yet. Tomorrow will be dangerous. Ashford is powerful, and powerful men do desperate things when cornered. But you have my protection, such as it is, and you have the protection of God, which is worth more than all the gold in the territory." The priest blessed them and left, promising to spread word of the morning service. The crowd outside gradually dispersed, though Jacob noticed that several men stayed settling in with rifles to guard the church through the night. Inside, the four survivors tried to rest. Rosa slept fitfully, her fever breaking at last. Red dozed, sitting up, his rifle across his knees. Nalin lay with her head on a folded coat, exhausted beyond measure. And Jacob stood at the window watching the dawn break over Copper Springs, and wondered if any of them would live to see another sunrise. But for the first time since losing everything, he found that he wanted to. He wanted to see Ashford brought to justice. He wanted to see Nalin safe and free. He wanted to rebuild something, anything that mattered. He wanted to live, really live, not just survive, and that, more than anything, terrified him, because wanting something meant you could lose it. And Jacob Stone had already lost more than any man should have to bear, but maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. The sun rose golden and clear, and Copper Springs woke to find that everything had changed. The truth was coming, and no amount of money or power could stop it now. The sun climbed higher, and by 9 o'clock the church bell began to ring. Not the violent clanging of the night before, but the measured, solemn toll that called the faithful to worship. And this Sunday morning, it seemed the entire town of Copper Springs had become faithful. They came in their Sunday best, miners in their cleanest shirts, shopkeepers in suits that smelled of mothballs, wives in dresses saved for special occasions. They came because Father Miguel had spread word that something important would be revealed, and in a small town starved for excitement, curiosity was a powerful draw. They came because they had seen the violence of the night before and wanted answers. They came because some of them, deep down, had always wondered about Cornelius Ashford's rapid rise to power and the convenient deaths that seemed to pave his way. Jacob stood near the altar, his rifle within reach, but not openly displayed. Nolin sat in the front pew, Rosa beside her, the older woman finally conscious and clear-eyed, though weak. Red positioned himself near the door, watching for trouble. The church filled quickly, every pew packed, people standing along the walls. Jacob estimated 200 souls, maybe more. The largest gathering he had seen in a decade. His hands were sweating, and he realized with some surprise that he was nervous. Facing killers in the snow was one thing. Facing the judgment of honest people was another entirely. Father Miguel took his position at the pulpit, his presence commanding immediate silence. He was dressed in his vestments now, every inch the shepherd of his flock. "My children," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the packed church, "today we gather not for a normal service, but for something far more important. Today we gather for truth." A murmur ran through the congregation. Father Miguel raised his hand for silence. "Last night 3 people sought sanctuary in this church. They were fleeing from violence from men who wanted them dead. And when I asked them why, they told me a story. A terrible story of murder and corruption, of greed and injustice. A story that involves the most powerful man in our town." The murmur grew louder. People shifted in their seats. Jacob saw fear in some faces, anger in others, and in a few, something that might have been vindication, as if they had been waiting for this moment. "I ask them to tell you this story themselves," Father Miguel continued, "to speak the truth in front of witnesses so that it cannot be hidden or denied. Señorita Nalin, daughter of Chieftain Mangas, please stand." Nalin rose slowly. In the morning light streaming through the stained glass, she looked both fragile and fierce, a young woman who had been forced to become a warrior. She walked to the front of the church, and every eye followed her. "My name is Nalin," she said, her voice clear and steady, despite the tremor Jacob knew she must be feeling. 6 months ago, my father was murdered. The soldiers said it was outlaws. They said he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. They lied." She paused, letting the words settle. "My father was killed because he refused to sell our land, land that has been Apache land for generations, land that Cornelius Ashford wanted for his copper mines." At the mention of Ashford's name, the church erupted. Some people gasped, others shouted denials, still others nodded, as if they had suspected as much all along. "Let her speak," Father Miguel commanded, and slowly the noise subsided. Nalin continued, her voice growing stronger. "My father said to me once, 'A man's worth is not in his gold, but in his word. Cornelius Ashford's word is worthless. His gold is built on blood.'" She reached into her dress and pulled out the letter, holding it high so everyone could see. "This is a letter from Ashford to Cade Brennan, ordering my father's death. It was found by Miguel Delgado, an accountant who discovered Ashford's crimes. And for his discovery, Miguel was burned alive in his office." Rosa stood supported by the pew and called out in a voice raw with grief, "My husband died because he chose truth over silence. Do not let his death be meaningless." The church was in chaos now, everyone talking at once, the sound building like a wave, and then cutting through the noise like a knife, a new voice spoke. "Lies, all of it. Lies told by a savage and a Mexican whore." The crowd parted and Cornelius Ashford walked down the center aisle. He was exactly as Jacob had imagined, tall, silver-haired, dressed in a suit that cost more than most men in the room would earn in a year. His face was handsome, in a cold patrician way, and he moved with the absolute confidence of a man who had never been denied anything he wanted. Behind him walked Sheriff Wade, hand on his gun, and 2 men who were clearly hired muscle. But notably absent was Cade Brennan. "Señor Ashford," Father Miguel said coldly, "you are not welcome to interrupt this service." "This is not a service, Father. This is a circus. And I will not stand by while my good name is dragged through the mud by criminals and liars." Ashford's voice was smooth, educated, reasonable, the voice of a man used to boardrooms and negotiations. "That letter is a forgery. I have never met this Brennan person, and the idea that I would order anyone's death is absurd." "Then why did you pay him?" Jacob called out, stepping forward. Why did you send him money 6 months ago, right after Mongus died?" Ashford's eyes flicked to Jacob, assessing, dismissing. "And you are Jacob Stone. You had my family killed 10 years ago." Something flickered across Ashford's face. Not guilt exactly, more like the irritation of a man reminded of an unpleasant chore. "I have never heard of you. You are clearly delusional." "Am I?" Jacob felt the old rage rising, but he kept his voice level. "My farm in Verde Valley. You wanted the land. My wife and son died in a fire started by men you hired, just like you hired men to kill Mongus, just like you killed Miguel Delgado." "Prove it." Ashford smiled, confident. "Show me proof that would stand up in a court of law, not the ravings of a grieving widow and a mountain hermit, but actual proof." "I can give you proof." The voice came from the back of the church, and every head turned. Cade Brennan stood in the doorway, and he looked like hell. His clothes were torn and bloody, his face haggard, but in his hand he held a bundle of papers. "Brennan," Ashford's composure cracked for the first time. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done years ago." Brennan walked down the aisle, and people shrank away from him. "I got letters, telegrams, receipts. Every job you hired me for, every man I killed, every fire I started. I kept them all just in case you ever decided I was a liability." He threw the papers at Ashford's feet. "There's your proof. Dates, amounts, names. Everything a marshal would need to hang you 10 times over." "You are a dead man," Ashford hissed. "Yeah, probably. But you are going to hang, and that's worth it." Sheriff Wade moved his hand toward his gun, but Red was faster. The old man's rifle was suddenly pointed at Wade's chest. "I wouldn't. Not in a church full of witnesses." Wade froze. Ashford looked around at the crowd, at the faces that had once looked up to him with respect, and now showed only disgust and anger. He was a man who had always controlled every situation through money and intimidation, and for the first time in his life, neither was working. "You people owe me everything," Ashford said, his voice rising. "This town exists because of me. Those mines, those jobs, that prosperity, mine, all of it mine. And you dare to judge me?" "We dare," said a voice from the crowd. It was Henry Whitfield, the old telegraph operator, standing with shaking hands. "Because prosperity built on murder is not prosperity, it is damnation." Others stood. "A miner, you cut our wages and threatened our families." "A Mexican woman, you burned our homes." "An Apache man who had ridden in from San Carlos, you poisoned our water and killed our chief." More and more voices, a chorus of the wronged and the forgotten, until the church rang with accusations. The door burst open again, and this time it was a U.S. Marshal flanked by 2 deputies. He was a hard-faced man in his 50s, with a badge that gleamed silver on his chest. "Cornelius Ashford?" the Marshal asked. "I am he." Ashford drew himself up, trying to reclaim some dignity. "And who are you?" "Marshal Thomas Reeves, out of Santa Fe. I received a telegraph 3 days ago about irregularities in land sales and suspicious deaths. And then last night I received another message from Father Miguel Santos describing events here. I think it is time you and I had a conversation. I want my lawyer. You will get one after you are in custody." Marshal Reeves gestured to his deputies. "Cornelius Ashford, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, racketeering, and about a dozen other charges that will take me the rest of the day to list." As the deputies moved to clamp irons on Ashford's wrists, the great man finally broke. "You cannot do this. Do you know who I am? Do you know how much money I have?" "I know exactly who you are," Marshal Reeves said quietly. "You are a man who thought he was above the law. But there is no one above the law, not even you." They led Ashford away in chains, and he went screaming threats and promises of revenge that everyone knew would never be kept. Sheriff Wade was arrested too, his corruption finally exposed. Brennan surrendered peacefully, knowing that cooperating might save him from the noose. When they were gone, the church was silent. Then slowly people began to cheer. Not a roar, but a building wave of relief and vindication of justice finally served. Father Miguel raised his hands for silence. Let us pray for the souls of those we have lost, for the courage of those who spoke truth, and for the wisdom to build something better from the ashes of corruption. They prayed. Even Jacob, who had not prayed in 10 years, bowed his head and whispered thanks to a God he was not sure he believed in anymore. After the service, people came to thank them, to shake Jacob's hand, to embrace Nalin, to tell Rosa how brave she was. It was overwhelming, this sudden flood of human kindness after so much violence. An older Apache woman took Nalin's hands and spoke in their language, tears running down her weathered face. Nalin translated for Jacob, "She says I have honored my father's memory, that the spirits of our ancestors are pleased." "Your father would be proud," Jacob said. "So would yours," Nalin replied, looking at him with those fierce, dark eyes. "Your Martha, your Samuel, they would be proud of what you did here." Jacob found he could not speak, so he simply nodded. 3 months passed. Spring came to Cedar Ridge like a benediction, melting the snow and coaxing green from the earth. The aspens leafed out brilliant green against the dark pines. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows in colors that hurt to look at after the monochrome of winter. On the ridge where the old cabin had stood, the blackened ruins had been cleared away. In their place rose a new structure, larger than the old one, with big windows that faced east to catch the sunrise. It was not finished yet, but the bones were good, the walls solid. Jacob stood on the new porch admiring his work, or rather their work, because he had not built this alone. Nalin emerged from the interior sawdust in her hair, a hammer in her hand. She had proven to be surprisingly skilled with tools, and she worked with a fierce determination that reminded Jacob every day why he had fallen in love with her. Not that he had told her that, not yet, but he thought she knew. "The window frames are in," she announced. "By next week we will have glass, real glass, not just oiled paper." "Fancy," Jacob said. "What will people think, a hermit living in luxury?" "You are not a hermit anymore. You are a homesteader. And I am your—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Partner," Jacob supplied. "If that works for you." "It works." She came to stand beside him, looking out over the valley. "Rosa sent a letter. She is doing well in Santa Fe with her sister. She asks when we will visit." "Soon, when the cabin is finished." "And when will that be?" "When it is done. No point rushing a good thing." Nalin laughed, and the sound was like music. "You have gotten very philosophical in your old age." "I have gotten very happy in my old age. There is a difference." They stood in companionable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains. Below in Copper Springs, life had changed. Ashford was in prison awaiting trial. The mines had been sold to a cooperative run by the workers. Father Miguel had been elected mayor, much to his dismay. And slowly, painfully, the town was learning to govern itself without a tyrant's hand. "Do you think about them?" Nalin asked quietly. "Your Martha and Samuel." "Every day," Jacob admitted. "But it does not hurt as much as it used to. I think they would want me to be happy, to live." "I think so too." "What about you, your father?" "The same. I honor his memory by living well, by fighting for justice, by building something good." She gestured at the rising cabin. "This is good." "Yes," Jacob agreed. "This is good." As darkness fell, they went inside to the fireplace that Jacob had built with stones from the creek. It was warm and bright, and it cast dancing shadows on walls that would soon be hung with the things they would collect together. A life built piece by piece from the ashes of old sorrows. Jacob looked at Nalin across the fire and thought about all the years he had wasted hiding in the mountains, waiting to die. All the beauty he had missed, all the connections he had refused. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For knocking on my door in that blizzard, for reminding me that I was alive." Nalin smiled, that fierce, beautiful smile that had first caught his attention. "Thank you for opening it." They sat together as the fire burned low, two survivors who had found each other in the storm, and they talked about the future. About the garden Nayland wanted to plant. About teaching Apache children to read and write. About maybe someday having a family. And outside the mountain, wind sang through the pines, carrying with it the promise of more storms to come, more challenges to face. But Jacob Stone was no longer afraid of storms. He had learned that sometimes the worst blizzard could bring the greatest gift. He had learned to live again. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.